everybody, today we're going to start on our blocks for the Sippin' on Sunshine quilt by Kimberbell. We're on video 3. We're going to work on the pennants, the Sippin' on Sunshine block, lemon, and the watermelon block. Hi everybody, a quick note on the schedule. As I was going through the schedule, I noticed I left off the strawberry block. I'm going to add that in here with video number 5 when we work on the flowers and the butterflies. We'll go ahead and do the strawberries as well. And then remember the filler blocks also, we're going to work on those near the end. Those are really easy to do. Let's go ahead and get started. If this happens to be your first video, I'm going to link the playlist below. We've already gone through videos 1 and 2. Video 1, I go through all the products. I am using the fabric kit if you need a fabric kit. Mine came from Prickly Paradise Quilts in Arizona. I'll link that below for you, courtesy of Kimberbell, but through the quilt shop. Video 2 is fabric and project prep. I go through some of the cutting and organization, and then today we're starting on the blocks. This schedule is a free schedule. There'll be a link below. You can download that from my website. I've done all my prep. I have all my fabric, batting, and embellishments ready. Anything that needs fusible is already taken care of. I'm using Pellon SF101 for my fusible. We're going to be making our Pennants Block, the Sippin' on Sunshine block, the lemon block, and the watermelon block. If you're not sure how to cut your batting, go through the instructions, look for the finished size of the block, and add an inch. The Pennants Block finishes at 6.5 inches square, so you want to cut your batting at 7.5 inches square. You're going to need thread, paper tape, and scissors. I have all my thread here in my fabric wrap rope bowl. This does have an embroidered base. I have a video on my channel showing exactly how to make this rope bowl. My threads are in Floriani and Simthread. I have one glide thread, and then this color here, Ocean, that has a question mark. I'm not sure. We'll see when we get to that block how that looks, if I like it, if I need to change it. You'll notice that some of the colors have a picture of a little bobbin next to it. That means they have you wind the thread and match your bobbin thread. I don't do that. My machine only likes 90 weight bobbin thread. The colored thread is not 90 weight. I believe it is 30 weight. It can mess up my machine, but when we're working through these threads, if we need to match the bobbin thread, I'll call it out for you. I'll tell you when it's time to switch your bobbin thread and when it's time to switch back. This quilt also uses a water-soluble top thread. I've used this kind of thread before. This is Vanish Light by Superior Threads. I was able to find that online. We'll start with the Pennants Block. You'll notice in your instructions it says the Pennants Block can be made in a 5x7 hoop. It can if you're not doing the background quilting. The background quilting file is 6.5 inches square. I'm going to use an 8-inch square hoop. Let's go ahead and load our stabilizer. I'm going to show this just this time in case anybody's brand new to machine embroidery. Here's my stabilizer. This roll happens to be 15 by 25. It's a different size than the Kimberbell Light Mesh Cutaway. The Kimberbell Light Mesh Cutaway I have right now is the smaller roll. It may not fit this hoop and I don't have enough of it, so I'm going to use this. You can see when I lay it like this, it looks like it'll fit, but it's going to be a tight squeeze. It'll be hard to adjust. So I'm going to turn it this way. That's going to give me extra room to go ahead and pull and tug and get this set correctly. I want a little bit over here and then a little bit over here because you do have to pull it to adjust it. I eyeball, I don't measure. I'm not sure if anybody actually measures the stabilizer for their hoop. Just make sure it's big enough. I went ahead and loosened my hoop. I'm going to pull out the middle piece and lay down my stabilizer. For this, the light mesh cutaway, it doesn't really matter which side is up. For some of the things like sticky back, you have to be careful which side goes up. Push your hoop in. Now this is the regular kind of hoop. These aren't magnetic, they're not anything special, they're what come with my machine. I have a really nice screwdriver here that somebody sent me. This is called a Creative Notions hoop screwdriver. I absolutely love it. The screwdriver is inside this little plastic piece. So when you're tightening it, the screwdriver can't slip and hit your hand. I used to use the regular screwdriver, so I had to be extra careful. I'm going to tighten it, but not all the way. And then what I'm going to do is pull and pull, pulling both sides at once to get this nice and flat. Try and get out all the wrinkles. And I'm going to tighten it more. I'm going to give it one more round of pulling. Yeah, that's in there pretty good. And then tighten it all the way. You want to make sure to screwdriver tighten with this type of hoop. If you only hand tighten, There's a chance that the inner hoop will pop out when you're working with it. That's happened to me when I forgot to use the screwdriver, and then you need to start over or sit and fuss and try to realign it. And most of the time, it's actually easier just to start over. This is in there nice and tight, nice and flat. Let's head over to the machine. I'm on a Baby Lock Meridian. My files are on USB. I like to have my instructions right next to my machine. I have them on a folding metal book stand. I've got my Sippin on Sunshine needle minder right here. This really comes in handy. It can help you keep track of where you are as you move through your instructions. Let's go ahead and bring up the files. I am working with the background quilting, so we're going to start by loading our quilting. It tells us we need KDQ 530 Weather 7 6x6. KDQ 530 Weather 7. That's this one. And then I need to find the 6x6 design. 6x6, we're going to hit set and then add. We need to add our Pennants block. I have to go back to my USB, back to Sippin on Sunshine, embroidery files, and then I need to find this Pennants block right here. We're not doing the pennant banner, we're doing the Pennants block. Go ahead and hit set, embroidery. And I do like to save each of these to my machine as I'm working through it in case something goes wrong. Then I've got it handy and I don't have to pull up both the quilting and the embroidery files again. When I'm done with the project, I go back and delete everything. I just slid my hoop onto the machine. You have to put this little arm down, lock it into place. Sometimes I forget and the machine beeps at me and it tells me. We're going to stitch out our batting placement line. It goes right on your stabilizer. The colored linen should be on your machine. We're going to grab our batting, cover the placement line, add a piece of tape, and then we're going to tack it down. Now I'm going to run through these first few steps kind of slow since this is our first block in this quilt, and I think for some people it's their first Kimberbell project. And one thing I forgot to show, I need to get better about showing this at the beginning, needles. Right now on my machine I have this super non-stick 8012 needle. I'm going to leave it on the machine. I haven't had any problems with it. When you start to have problems, if you haven't changed your needle in a while, change your needle. The other type of needle you can use for this is a regular machine embroidery 7511 needle. Let's stitch out the tack down line. Once the batting is tacked down, you need to trim away the extra that's outside of that stitch line. I like to use the double curved applique scissors. There's a right-handed and a left-handed version of these. I'll link them both below. I normally take this off my machine. I put it on a table. I'm just going to show you how I trim. I kind of lift it a little bit, and then I like to keep an eye on the stitching here. Make sure that I don't cut the stitching. If you cut the stitching, don't worry about it. The next thing we're going to stitch out is the fabric placement line, and we're covering this with fabric. If you cut your stabilizer, grab a piece of paper tape, put it underneath, press it down, and you're good to keep going. I'm going to go ahead and take this off my machine, put it on a table, and trim away the batting. You always want to support underneath. You don't want to be moving your stabilizer. Here's what that looks like when that's all trimmed. The next thing we're going to stitch out is the fabric placement line. You want to grab your background fabric. This should have fusible on the back, and make sure you cover that placement line. There's plenty there if you've cut according to the instructions. I always like to add a piece of tape. It's probably not going to move, but it doesn't hurt to add the tape. This is the same piece of tape I just used for the batting. I will use the tape over and over and over again until it doesn't stick anymore. The next thing we're going to stitch is the fabric tack down line. So a square is going to go around the outside of this fabric. The fabric is tacked down. You don't trim it at this time. We're going to trim all our blocks together after we've made the first 4 blocks. We'll use the orange pop rulers to do that. The next thing we're going to stitch out is the background quilting. The background quilting is done. We're going to start on the embroidery and applique. What I'll do is I'll call out the color name, and if you're using Glide, you can grab that color, but I'll show you my colors as well as the color number. We need to switch to butter, and we're going to stitch out the Pennant 1 Shadow Fill. Next is the color Monarch, and we're going to stitch out the Pennant 2 Shadow Fill. Switch to Cappuccino, and we're going to stitch out the Post Fills. We're going to go back to the color butter and we're going to stitch out the Pennant 1 placement line. Pennant 1 uses felt from the embellishment kit. If you're not using the embellishment kit, you can use fabric. If you're using fabric, you may want to put fusible on the back, especially if you have a lighter color fabric for the pennant. The blue on this background print could show through. I've got the felt here. I just peeled off the tape from the top of the block when I did the fabric placement line. Make sure it's covered, and we're going to stitch the tack down line. Once the tack down is stitched, you want to trim everything outside of the tack down line. Be careful as you trim this. This doesn't have any detail stitching around the outside. It's what they call a raw, R-A-W, edge applique. If you're like me and you caught your tape, what I usually like to do is put my fingernail on the stitch line and then gently pull off the tape. Make sure I don't pull out those stitches, and then I'll grab a pair of tweezers if I need to, but let's see. Nope, that came right off. Great. So go ahead and trim away the extra that's outside of the stitch line. Pennant 1 is done. We want to switch to the color Monarch, and we're going to go through the same steps. We're going to stitch out the placement line, then we'll put down our felt, tack it down, and trim. Pennant 2 uses the red felt if you're working with the embellishment kit. I'm going to go ahead and tape that in place and stitch out the tack down, and then I'll trim it. Both the pennants should be trimmed. We're going to switch back to the linen color and we're going to stitch out the text. It's going to stitch Sunshine on My Mind. Some of the text goes on Pennant 1 and some goes on Pennant 2. This block is all stitched out. Check your block, see if you've got any little jump threads. It looks like I have one right here that needs to be trimmed. I'm going to take this out of the hoop and set it aside. We'll trim all our blocks together at the end. Next, we're going to work on the Sippin' on Sunshine block. Once you're done with whatever's on your screen, you can hit the home button and it'll say OK to cancel. It's okay. We're going to start on Sippin' on Sunshine. I am doing the block by block quilting again. I'm going to get this loaded before I figure out which size hoop I need to use. We need to find KDQ 529 Drink 3 4x8 design. Let's go to our quilting, KDQ 529 Drink 3, and then I need the 4x8 design right here. I'm going to go ahead and hit set. Sorry, I forgot to silence my phone. Apparently something is at the bird feeder. We'll go ahead and we will add the Sippin' on Sunshine. There's our embroidery files. And let's find Sippin' on Sunshine. I have to keep the phone on today. There's some construction stuff going on and I need to have that on in case they text me and they need anything. Set. Save it to my machine just in case. Embroidery. And my machine tells me it can use the biggest hoop or the next to the biggest hoop. 8.5 by 4.5. So my 8-inch square hoop isn't going to work for this. I'm going to need to go up one size. The next size hoop I have is 8 by 12, which will be just fine because the 4.5 is this way, the 8.5 is this way. I'm going to put some stabilizer in my 8 by 12 hoop and we'll start this block. I have the linen color on my machine. The first thing we're going to do is our background quilting. We just did that, so I'm going to run all of these steps together. We have our batting placement. Place your batting, tack it down. Fabric placement. Place your fabric, tack it down, and do the background quilting. Exactly the same as before. Once the background quilting is done, we're going to start with the embroidery. We're switching to Grotto Blue. This is the color I'll be using for that, and we're going to stitch out the words Sippin' on Sunshine. Once the words are stitched, we're going to switch to Clover, and we're going to stitch out the leaves fill. The next color we're going to use is Ocean. I changed it. And this was one of the colors I had a question mark on when I pulled my colors. In fact, I think it was the only one that was questionable. This is the fabric. This is the original color I pulled for Ocean. And I kept thinking it's too green, it's too green. I've held it up against some of the other fabrics. I don't like the way that it looks. I went back to my thread wall and I found this color. Much better. This is the color number for that in case you were using the Simthreads. So I'm going to put this on my machine. If you're using Glide, put the color Ocean on, and we're going to stitch out the Flower 1 placement line. Grab your Flower 1 fabric. You want to cover the placement line and then stitch the tack down and trim. That's all trimmed. We're going to stitch the Flower 1 decorative outline. Don't worry if you can't get in between the petals all the way. The decorative outline is going to go around the flower and it's going to cover that part up. We're going to switch to Grotto Blue and stitch out the Flower 1 center fill. Next we're going to stitch out Flower 3. The petal fills are first using the color Butter, and then when that's stitched out, we're going to switch to Linen and stitch out the center fill. I'll go ahead and run those two steps together. The next steps are for flower number 2 in the upper corner. If you're not using the embellishment kit, or a button, you want to go ahead and stitch that out. I am using the embellishment kit, so I have the button for that one. If you need to stitch it out, the steps are right here in the instructions. Number 9, 10, and 11 with all your color changes. We are done with this block. I'm going to take this off the machine and we're going to start the next block. Next up is the lemon block. I'm sorry if I've got background noise. There's a truck outside. You might hear something. We're going to load KDQ 527 Outdoor 6 4x4 horizontal design. So let's find that. KDQ 527 Outdoor 6 says 4x4 horizontal. It's going to be this one because the lemon is going to go like this. So we want the design like this. I'm going to go ahead and hit set and add, and we'll add our lemon on top of that. I'm going to save that to my machine and we're ready to go. You can see this is a smaller block. I can use my 5x7 hoop for this one. Linen thread on the machine. We're going to go through the same beginning steps up through the background quilting. I'll go ahead and run all of that together. We're going to switch to the color Buttercup and we're going to stitch out the placement line for our lemon fabric. You're going to place your lemon fabric right side up. This one's got fusible on the back. Make sure to cover your placement line, stitch the tack down, and trim. Once that's trimmed, you can stitch out the lemon satin outline. Once you've stitched the satin outline, you want to switch to aloe, and we're going to stitch out the stem fill and then the leaves placement line. It's 2 steps on the embroidery machine, but I'll go ahead and run them both together. Next, we want to place our leaf felt. If you're using the embellishment kit, it's the felt. If you're using fabric, you can use fabric. If you're using fabric, I would put fusible on the back if your background print is like this and it might be visible through your fabric. Got a little piece of tape there. I'm going to tack that down and then trim. I actually stitched the tack down and the shading details. Go ahead and trim outside of those lines, and this is another raw edge applique. There's no more stitching for this piece. I trimmed around the leaves. I did use the snips for that. I found those were easier than the bigger double curved applique. I did not try to cut out this little piece in between the leaves. They actually show it just like this in the instructions. They didn't trim out that piece to try and make the leaves look separate. So I'm going to leave it like that. We want to switch to linen, and we're going to stitch out the peel detail. This is all stitched out. If you're stitched like mine on these little side details, you've got some jump threads in here. Looks like 1, 2, 3, 4 on this side. Over here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on that side. Generally, I use my snips for those. I can get underneath and snip it, and then sometimes I have to hold it up with tweezers to get the other piece snipped off. I'm going to do that while we're working on the watermelon block. There'll be plenty of time to snip all these little threads during the background quilting. Let's load the watermelon block on our machines. Let's go ahead and get the watermelon block loaded. We'll start with the quilting. KDQ 527 outdoors 6 4x6 vertical. 527 outdoors 6 4x6 vertical. So on your screen the design is going to be sideways because we're stitching out the watermelon sideways. 4x6 vertical. It looks like that. Let's add our watermelon block. This one gives me a size of 6.5 by 4.5. I can use my 8-inch square hoop for this one. The background quilting is in the color linen again. I've got that on my machine. I'll go ahead and move through that just like I've been doing. Once the quilting is done, we're going to start working on the watermelon. This is the fabric in the kit for the watermelon, and it says to use the color Monarch for the next few steps. This is the color I have pulled from Monarch. It's very red. It looks like it matches a little bit more on camera, but it's more red than pink. I have another color that I pulled for the color Tango, and I like the way that looks with this fabric better than the red. So I'm going to use this color for the next few steps, but if you're using the fabric kit and the Glide colors, the instructions say to switch to Monarch. We're going to stitch the fabric placement line, place the watermelon fabric, tack it down, and trim. I'll go ahead and run those first few steps together. Once you have your watermelon fabric tacked down and trimmed, we're going to stitch the watermelon top decorative outline. Next, we're going to switch to linen and we're going to stitch out the inner rind satin outline. Switch to aloe and we're going to stitch out the placement line for the watermelon rind. We're going to place our felt. If you're not using the embellishment kit, you'll have fabric. One thing about this particular piece, when we go to trim this, you're going to have a lot left over. I'm definitely going to be saving that piece of felt. I'm going to add a piece of tape, tack it down, and then trim. Next, we're going to stitch out the rind details. For the watermelon seeds, we're going to use the color Hickory. Here's the color I'm using for that. If you want, you can match your bobbin thread to the top thread. I'm not going to do that. I talked about that already. This thread is a different weight. I'm going to stitch it out with my regular 90 weight white bobbin thread, and we'll see how that comes out, and then you can decide if you want to bother changing your bobbin thread or not. That's all stitched out. If you change to a matching bobbin thread, switch back to your regular bobbin thread. Let's have a close-up look at the seeds. I did not change my bobbin thread. They all look okay to me. I don't see any white anywhere. Maybe a little bit right there. Tiniest little bit, but I think it's fine. It did well for not switching out the bobbin thread. We're going to go ahead and start trimming our blocks. Make sure you change your bobbin thread back. You don't want to start your next project with the hickory bobbin thread if you've switched that out. We're going to trim our blocks. I'm going to show you how to use the orange pop rulers. I'll go slow for our first block since this is the first video in the series, and then as we progress throughout the quilt along, I'll go a little bit faster. I do have both sets of orange pop rulers. They'll be linked below. I bought these a long time ago. I have the square set and the rectangle set. Both sets come with 3 rulers. The square set comes with a square template, and the rectangle set comes with bonus rulers, flying geese ruler in 2 sizes, a tumbler template, and standard 3.5-inch ruler with a 1/4-inch guide. So you do get a couple of extra bonus things with your orange pop rulers. When I use the orange pop rulers, I'll use my rotary cutter. I've got a fairly new blade on this. I have this little clip tin container. I use it as a paperweight, or sometimes I'll use a water bottle or something that I have nearby to help hold the ruler down as I'm turning and doing my cutting. We're going to start with the pennant block. We're going to trim this to 6.5 inches square. Your square set has 4.5, 6.5, and 8.5. All of my rulers have some non-stick stickers on the back. I placed those on the back so they wouldn't slip. I can't remember if they came with the rulers or I bought them separate. I'll link that below for you in case you need this for some of your rulers. We're going to start with the 6.5, and then I put the 8.5 around it because when we trim it, it gives you extra room for your hand. What you want to do is line up the inside of the ruler with that fabric tack down line. Take a moment, try and get it as centered as possible. As a side note, if you don't have the orange pop rulers, if you've got the 6.5 by 12.5 inch ruler, it's pretty standard for quilters. You can lay this down because it's 6.5 inches wide. Cut 2 sides, lay it down, and cut the other 2 sides. Or if you're like me, you also have a 6.5 inch square ruler, I can put that down and trim all the way around. But let's use the orange pop rulers for this. I've got that where I want it. I'm going to place my little clip tin over here. It's my paperweight. I try to not move the rulers, but sometimes they just slip, or you bump them, or you turn it, and maybe you've got a roll of stabilizer over here like I do, and it clips the corner of the ruler. If that happens, just reset your ruler. These are a little bit different than a regular ruler. If you're right-handed, you're going to cut on your left. If you're left-handed, you're going to cut on your right. You're trimming on the inside of the ruler. Go ahead and put your blade out, and you start inside the notch. Put your blade in the notch, and then move it as far over as possible, because there's a little wiggle room in here. You want it all the way over to the side. So for me, that's the left side. Make sure it's all the way over. Watch your fingers. We're going to go all the way to the top where the notch is. Don't put your hand like this. It's going to be in the way. And don't have your fingers hanging over where you're going to be cutting. So make sure your hand is out of the way, and then go ahead and cut that side. I'm going to put my blade down. I'm going to turn. I'm going to put my hand back on the ruler. Move my little paperweight, put my blade back out, hand down and out of the way, all the way over to the side. Blade down, and turn, hold, move my little paperweight, make sure everything looks good. And our last side. And let's see how we did. Go ahead and take this out. It came out great. And when I look at it, I can see I've got a little bit of thread on this side. No thread on this side. That means it was probably just a little bit crooked. It's not going to matter. This one is trimmed. What I like to do once they're trimmed is put them back in their bag. That keeps them clean and organized until the end of the project when we put everything together. I'm going to do the lemon block next because it's 4.5 inches square and we've got the square rulers. There's your lemon block. Since the lemon block is 4.5 inches, I can actually use all 3 of these if I like. Now you don't have to do that if you don't want to. If you're comfortable with just using the one ruler that you need and holding it, you can. I'm tall, I have big hands. I like to have a little more room for my hands when I'm trimming my blocks. Get it all lined up and you'll trim it just like we did before. I'm going to use my little paperweight and go ahead and trim. Remember, all the way over. Going to trim the watermelon block next. It trims to 4.5 by 6.5. The rectangle rulers come as 4.5 by 6.5, 6.5 by 8.5, and 8.5 by 10.5. There's also lines on the rulers. You'll see there's grid lines. There's arrows on all the sides for the midpoints. That can also help you line up your block. I'm just going to start by setting that down. When I use the really big rectangle one, it kind of sticks off my mat. That's alright, I'll leave it on there. I'll link this cutting mat for you below. Kimberbell also makes one that fits with the orange pop rulers. If I didn't already have a cutting mat, I would buy one of those because I use these so often. Going to get it all lined up and then trim this just like we did the square blocks. The Sippin' on Sunshine block is a little bit different. It trims to 8.5 by 4.5. They use a combination of the orange pop rulers. They start with the 4.5, so the small one again. And you can see it's not big enough because I don't have a 4.5 by 8.5. What they do is they put this one down and you can surround it with the other rulers for stability. They show visually centering this. I'm only going to trim the top and the bottom. We have our top and bottom trimmed. We're going to take out the 4.5 by 6.5. Now we have the one that's 8.5. I'm looking to catch these stitch lines here and here. and trim along the side. And we'll go back and we'll get the part of the block that's not trimmed. I'm going to get that lined up on both sides. Trim on this side. And then turn and trim on the other side. And now when you take the rulers away, you'll notice part of the block isn't trimmed because we used that inner ruler, which was too small. So see that? So our sides are done, but we have to complete the top and the bottom. Grab a regular ruler and then trim whatever's not trimmed. So we can line up and just trim those parts that we need to trim. We'll go ahead and just flip that around. Hit the tripod. That's all right. We're almost done. Line that up. All done. Let's get a look at all of our blocks and then we'll talk about what we'll be stitching next week. We have our pennant block, Sippin' on Sunshine, lemon and watermelon blocks. These all came out great. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them below for me. Also, please remember to like, subscribe, and share. Next week, we're going to work on the sky, the bluebird, the sun hat, and life is a picnic. I hope you've enjoyed stitching the first 4 blocks for Sippin' on Sunshine with me. I have a Facebook group that's linked below. If you're interested in joining, please answer the one security question. We would love to have you in the group. I'll be back next week with another set of blocks. See you next time.